Hello and welcome again to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and so nice to hear that music again on a Monday and be back with you. Thank you so much for being with us. We sure value this time we get to spend with you, and we're very, very grateful that you're spending the time with us. Hey, look, I know, and we all know here that a lot of people want to talk and also hear what some of our apologists have to say about the new motu proprio from Pope Francis about the celebration of the older form of the Mass. So what we did was we invited a couple of our bigwigs to come in tomorrow and do that. So we'll do that the first hour tomorrow. We wanted to make sure we gave everybody a chance to read and process and all that. We try not to be giving knee-jerk reactions to things, although we have knee-jerk reactions to things. We just try to turn off the microphones when we have them. So tomorrow we'll do that. Today, man, do we have a great show from you. One of the great writers of theology in the world today, Dr. Paul Gondreau with us the second hour. We're going to talk about Jesus as the cure to toxic masculinity. And that's a talk he's going to give at our conference coming up in September. So we've got an all Jesus day for you, because this hour we talk with, who would you rather talk with on a Monday? There ain't nobody. Dr. Ray Guarendi, the host of The Doctor Is In on EWTN. He has a new book out called Jesus, Master Psychologist. Listen to him. Hello, Dr. Ray Guarendi.
Cy, I'm getting a little tired of having to write books just to get on your show.
Well, we feel like if we do that, it encourages you. It encourages you in your output.
Well, I'll tell you, one book per year to get a visit here. You know, when you were talking about the fella coming in the second hour, you were flinging around great and all this kind of stuff, and I was getting pretty fluffed up. And then I heard his name and not mine.
I apologize. The great Dr. Ray is here. That sounds like you're a magician, though, if I say it that way. The great Dr. Ray.
The amazing
Dr. Ray. The incomparable Dr. Ray. Jesus, the Master Psychologist. First of all, thank you for the book. But I thought of this. I'm so clever. I bet nobody else who's interviewed you, not even the great Father Mitch Pacwa, has asked this question. But it's a question you ask in your book. What grade would Jesus get in his freshman counseling course in college?
He'd flunk out.
He flunk? Why?
He couldn't even take it past fail.
So what's the I'm sure that the shortcoming is not in Jesus then. So what's the shortcoming in modern counseling that Jesus would make Jesus not fit in?
One of the things he says, Cy, when you do what you're supposed to do, just say, I'm an unworthy servant.
Yeah.
Or you could say, worthless servant. Now, you can't call anybody that.
No.
Not in modern self-esteem gospel. Are you kidding me? Where is he coming from with that? I think that's the question. What does he mean? So if I were to ask you, and you wrote a wonderful book yourself. Here's something that's hard to understand, among the things that are hard to understand. I'm going to get in my car here because I was getting ready to walk into the house, and I heard my wife vacuuming. And I thought, I don't want to interrupt that. You know what I mean?
What now? Why? Is it a rarity?
Well, no. She said she is going to vacuum when Sears comes up with a riding vacuum cleaner. That's all I know. That's what she said.
All right.
So here's the thing. What is the dumbest thing that somebody could say about Jesus?
I think
Go ahead.
I think I know. I'm not sure because, but I think that you would probably say Jesus is a good man.
That is really dumb. I used to do evaluations for a state mental hospital. Typically, the parents would bring in a young adult. The young adult would be probably psychotic, have delusions. However, he knew that he was being screened for possible commitment. So what did he do? Well, he sounded clear. He was very guarded in his answers, and for the whole interview, he could make sense. And then at the end, if I said something like, anything else? Anything else you want to tell me? For president. Now, that interview went on 30 seconds too long. That's a delusion.
Right.
You can't be so wrong about who you are, because that's really the number one criterion for self-awareness. Who are you? Well, Jesus said he's God.
Yeah.
Now, wait a minute. Now, if that man is not God, he's not a good man. The nicest thing we could say about him is he's off his rocker. The worst thing we could say about him is he's a liar. And he knows he's a liar. And he knows people are going to die because of him. So anybody who says that knows nothing about Jesus, knows nothing about what he said, knows nothing about what he taught, knows nothing about history, knows nothing. The only way Jesus could be a good man is if he were God. And that means, Si, that everything he says we have to listen to, whether we like it or not, or whether modern psychology says we agree with him or not. That's the key.
So, right. So his psychology is the psychology of the one who really understands human psychology. From every angle, he understands it.
He wired us. He knows me better than I know myself.
Yeah.
And the reason is, and this is one of the other things he said, because I got a block in my eye. When he said, get the log out of your own eye to take the speck out of your brother's, I think a lot of people interpret that to mean, well, okay, as long as I'm aware of who I am, I can critique you, Si.
Yeah.
I'm able to admonish you, Si, because I know who I am. Well, the problem with that is a log blocks you totally. A log basically says you can't see. And I think that's one of the main things in psychology. If you don't have insight into who you are, you don't progress as a Christian. You don't progress as a person at all. And when our Lord says, get that log out of your eye, what he's saying is, you better be open to who you are. So when I left the Catholic Church, I was gone for 8 years. And I was in a standard non-denominational. I never went to confession. I didn't have to think about my sins. Why? Jesus paid the price for all of my sins, past, present, and future. So really, I got kind of lazy in looking at myself. When I went back to the Catholic Church, one of my big traumas was going to confession. Uh-oh. Now I got to look at me. Now I got to see who I am. I don't want to do that. I don't like that. And so, as a result, Jesus says, as a psychologist, you better be totally open to looking at yourself and realizing in God's eyes you're still loved.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not, you're not moving forward. I can have the best techniques in the world as a shrink, Si. Somebody comes into my office, I can give them maybe ideas that I've gleaned over the last 45 years. But if they don't see themselves as needing those ideas, I go nowhere. Dead in the water.
The book is called Jesus, the Master Psychologist, probably the leading Catholic psychologist in the United States, Dr. Ray Guarendi. The amazing Dr. Ray Guarendi is our guest. Our number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. You can call and ask any question you want. I'll tell you the question I want to ask, and I'm going to ask it after the break, and then I will let callers have at Dr. Ray, and that is there a way in which that there might be some power in combining what Jesus teaches as a psychologist with modern techniques? Could there be a real source of healing in such a union of faith and science, a union of the insights of the Lord himself that he's revealed to us in the insights of science? We'll ask Dr. Ray that when we come back right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Wings is the weekly newsletter that's packed with program info, features, and updates of all that's going on at the Global Catholic Network. Just go to ewtn.com/wings. Fill out your name and email address, and you'll start getting your wings every week. When you get yours, send it to all your friends, and they can send it to their friends. And pretty soon, we're covering the whole world with the good news about EWTN. Wings, the weekly newsletter from EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Dr. Ray Guarendi, our guest. You hear him weekdays on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. With the doctor is in, and you see him on the EWTN airwaves and here and there. And you've probably read some of his books. If you're a Catholic parent, and you're lucky, someone has given you one of his books, but he's got one now about Jesus called Jesus, the Master Psychologist. Listen to him. You're welcome to call and ask about Jesus, about the kind of psychology that Jesus practices and reveals to us. 888-318-7884. First, my question, though, Dr. Ray. It seems to me that part of what I get from you in looking at the book and hearing, I've gotten to hear some of your interviews regarding the book, is that there is actually not nothing to science. Like the science is actually very, very helpful for the psychologist and the psychiatrist, and that maybe if we join the modern techniques up with an understanding that comes from Christ himself about what the human person is, we might have a real potent mix there.
Psychology is supposed to be connected to reality. Jesus is the ultimate realist.
Yeah.
So therefore, you would think that in time, psychology would come around to agreeing with Jesus, even though they might not say it. They might not say, well, we've just discovered something that the Savior of the world was talking about 2,000 years ago. No, they won't say that. But on a separate track, let me give you a couple examples. Jesus says, you want to be great? Serve. There's all kinds of research in psychology that says that if you give of yourself to others, you will be more contented. You will have less depression, less anxiety. There was a study done of elderly, and they asked them, what is it? What is it that will make aging much more satisfactory? And they concluded, they called it a wide social network, a broad social network. Most people, Si, would think, oh, well, that makes sense. Sure, you got people who love you, you got people who care for you, you got people who take care of your needs, you got people to watch over you. That was not the conclusion. The conclusion was a broad social network allows the elderly to serve. They can babysit, they can volunteer, they can mentor, they can be active at church. In other words, it gives them more opportunities to take care of others. And that is what leads to that sense of peace, that sense of whatever it is that makes their elderly years better. That's one.
Wow.
Another one is this. They've done studies. The people who give more materially to charity, to others, who give of their possessions, of their welfare, whatever it is that they have, are also more content. In fact, those who pursue materialism can never get enough. Never. They're never satisfied. No matter how much you have, never satisfied. Well, you would think that you would be. Jesus says, don't store up for grain barns here. Don't store up your grain barns here, because you really don't know when you're going to be asked to leave.
Right.
But we Americans, we really pursue our grain barns. Or you drive down the street, you look into garages. Shoot, those things could outfit a small hardware store.
Right.
The stuff that's in garages. The irony side is that our second most expensive possession, our car, sits in the driveway because we have so much stuff in the garage.
Right.
We can't get our car in there. So our Lord is saying that the one thing he warned about the most you know this, Si, materialism.
Yeah.
He talked about that more than anything else. You know, I like the Old Testament. The Old Testament's kind of cool because the Old Testament says I only have to give 10%. Well, that ain't bad. No, I can give 10%. Now, is that gross or net? I don't know. I'll have to check into that. The Old Testament's 10%. The New Testament, Jesus calls us to 50%. You got 2 coats, give to one who has none.
Yep.
Oh, now, wait a minute. Now, nobody gives 50%. Come on, I don't give 50%. And I don't think Jesus expects that. He was making a point. However, I think we Christians, we had a Nigerian priest just this Sunday at the parish where I attended. And he talked about, he said, first of all, Americans, please be grateful for what you have. He says, you sit in this church, and the persecution you get is that somebody says something nasty about you as Catholics. He said, where I am from, Boko Haram, one of their practices is they take abandoned street kids, they give them food, they put a knapsack on their back, they send them into the Mass, they say, when you come out, we'll give you some more food, and then they blow the child up in the Mass, and as many people as they can kill. This particular priest said, he was scheduled to be beheaded, he and many of his fellow priests. He escaped the night before he was scheduled to be beheaded, but many of his priest friends did not escape, and they were beheaded. He was crying while he was giving his homily. And I thought about that. And I looked at us sitting in that parish, and I knew the income in that parish was millions and millions and millions of dollars per year. No doubt in my mind. I don't want to know what that missionary priest collected that Sunday.
Yeah.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
Mm-hmm.
So our Lord said, look, you give it away and it will be better for you. He was right. He's absolutely right. The more you own, the more it owns you. So that was definitely, I think that's definitely from a psychological perspective, that's one of the healthier things you can do.
As you speak, though, it strikes me that so many of us so often have the idea that what Jesus is teaching us is meant for our eternal happiness, but we all know it'll make us miserable in this life. But you're saying, come on, that's not what he's teaching. He's not teaching misery now for joy later. He's certainly, I mean, you'd have more suffering if you were giving away more. I mean, you just won't have as much stuff. But he's not demanding miserable followers.
Si, did you hear what you just said?
I never listen to what I say. I find it's very distracting if I do.
You said
Yeah.
you would have more suffering if you gave away more stuff. How many of us give away stuff to the point of suffering?
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true.
We just have a little less of our excess.
Yeah, right. That's right.
That's the absolute truth. You know that. Our Lord said, here is the best way to live. Now, it makes no sense if he's going to say, you will have peace if you follow me. And he also said you'll have a cross. I know he's kind of give mixed messages there, but he expects his followers to have joy and peace. Well, how's that going to be unless he tells you how to do that?
Yeah.
I had a priest friend one time, and I asked him, what for you is the biggest proof of the truth of the Christian faith? And he said, the system works. I said, what do you mean by that? What system? He said, the moral system. In other words, if we live according to the way Christ lived, and psychology is really coming to this conclusion, we will be more content. There was a survey done by Gallup. He does this and he asked Christians versus non-Christians about their lifestyles, about their morality, about their marriages, about their views. Now, Si, know the bad news to that, don't you?
Well, yes. I mean, we're becoming like the culture around us.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
He said 90% of Christians live pretty much no differently than the culture around them.
Right.
However, he said there were 10% of the people surveyed, and he called them living saints. I don't know how he defined that, but he said they pray more, they're healthier, they have better marriages, they are happier, they do better in life measurements. So it's interesting because the ones who more closely follow what Christ said to live by actually live better, psychologically speaking.
Yes.
That's the key. That's the difference.
Right.
It's not so much the matter of, okay, I'll be a Christian. I mean, the Lord says we will have woe and suffering. It's going to be awful. Okay, I'll just kind of grit my teeth until I get to heaven, maybe. That's not what he said. He said, do this. I'll give you another example. You want another example, Si?
I would like another example. Yes.
Back in the 70s, now you weren't born yet.
Oh.
However, Jimmy Akin was probably 30 or 35. Okay. So back in the 70s,
Yeah.
did you hear of something that came out called assertiveness training?
Oh, yes. This was going to make us all better. We just needed to assert
Yes.
so that other people would respect what we need in life.
That's right. You let them know that they have terribly stepped upon your rights. You be assertive. You make sure you're not an emotional basket case because you'll just fall apart. That's what assertiveness training did. Well, there's some interesting research that has said those people who are better at turning the other cheek, to use biblical language, are more content, not only in their relationships, but in life, than
Yeah.
those people who are hyper-vigilant to offense. I can't believe you said that about me. That hurts. Who are you to say that about me? I'm going to let you, you're going to find out exactly what I think. I am not going to let this one get by. Our Lord said, turn the other cheek. Si, when was the last time you were punched in the head?
It's been a long time. My wife has gotten much gentler. So it's been a long time.
Well, you're listening better, that's why.
Yeah, that's right. I require less of it now. Yeah, you're right.
I think the last time I got punched, I was in the 9th grade.
Yeah, right.
So when our Lord said, turn the other cheek, he wasn't speaking if somebody slaps you. Although, isn't this interesting? Now, I think you're a very well-versed apologist, Si. You do. You listen to all these folks that come on the program, and you just have to absorb all the stuff they give you. And in your own right, you're a tremendous apologist.
Thank you.
Have you heard the interpretation that when in Jesus' time somebody slaps you across the face, that was the ultimate nonverbal insult?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, you're worthless. You're just worthless. He said, give them your other cheek. In other words, you're saying to them, you can't make me worthless. You don't determine my worth. My worth is determined by God. Well, 99.99999% of the stuff that is a slap on the cheek to us comes in words.
Right.
Hurtful or nasty or offensive or critical or put downish, whatever. And our Lord's saying, all you have to worry about is whether it's true. Because if it's not, just turn the other cheek. You don't have to live your life. I can't believe, my mother-in-law, I cannot believe how she comments on my parenting. She's been commenting on my parenting, ever since we had our 4th kid. She started 4 kids. Oh, how many are you going to have? You're ruining my son. And then, when we decided to homeschool, she never lets up. She makes her comment. Let her go in one ear and out the other. Turn the other cheek. Don't let her get to you. We have such a hard time doing that. Jesus says, you do that, you'll be fine.
Isn't that now? Did you have to unlearn some of the psychology you learned in order to relearn the psychology that you hear in the gospel?
I went through graduate school. You ever see somebody that has like one skeptical eye raised?
Yes.
And they're listening to something, they're thinking, what? I don't know about that. I had that reaction to much I was taught in grad school. I kept thinking, "Oh, no, wait a minute. It doesn't really square with reality." And I wasn't all that Christian in grad school. I really wasn't. I mean, college and everything, you kind of make your own rules, and I was one of those. I never really left the church, but I kind of got flexible, shall we say, in my approach. And so there was a part of me that was already skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got further and further into psychology, what I noticed was that many people, whether they were Christians or atheists or whatever, didn't realize that they were drifting from the way God said to do it, and in large part that was creating a lot of the misery.
Dr. Ray Guarendi is our guest. Jesus, the Master Psychologist is his new book. Alexander in Miami, we're going to get to you right when we come back. Other callers will get to you as well. 888-318-7884.
Catholic Answers Live.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers is doing it again. We're holding our 7th annual Apologetics Conference this September in beautiful San Diego, California, and we'd like to see you there. Join us September 23rd to 26th for a lively and inspiring conference with an all-star lineup of speakers guaranteed to jumpstart your faith. It's a great chance to meet all your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and very special guests as we spend 4 days talking about worshiping and adoring our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is where it all begins. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us this September for a conference that is sure to ignite, inspire, and inform your faith. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register.
There can be a fine line between love and hate.
Plan to join us to talk about that tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie
On most of these EWTN stations.
Now here's more of Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Dr. Ray Guarendi is our guest. His brand new book, Jesus, the Master Psychologist. Listen to him. A very fine book in the tradition of Dr. Ray's books. But I'm so glad that it feels to me like in some ways this book is a summation in a way, because you've written about many topics from the Christian perspective, but this one goes right to the root of it, goes right to the master. It feels like it brings it all together in a certain way.
Every time I read or hear something from Scripture at Mass that Jesus said, my instinct is to say, how does that fit with modern psychological views? and I find, of course, that what he said, for example, he says this, a psychologist would never say this, but he says this. He says, do not be anxious about tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
But tomorrow has its own worries. Now, someone might say, well, how do I do that? How do I not be anxious about tomorrow? Because we are a how-to people. Every book you write is supposed to be how-to. And Jesus is saying, hey, don't forget, you have the ability, you have the will to not be anxious about tomorrow. They've done studies in anxiety. And what they found was that the person who is mad at the anxiety, who gets upset that this anxiety is controlling them, is much more likely to overcome the anxiety.
Wow.
The person who says, "Oh, it's such a horrible experience. I can't deal with it. It's frightening. It just threw me for a loop. I don't know. I can't deal with it." They're much less likely to conquer the anxiety. I know we have to get to the calls. I'll give you a quick example. When I was 23 years old, first year of grad school, everybody warned me about this one supervisor. You don't want him. He's intimidating. He'll make you feel like you don't know anything. Well, of course, I got him. That's what my supervisor was. So my first 5 or 6 visits to this guy, I was nervous and unsure of myself and intimidated. One day I was walking down the hall to his office, and I remember thinking, this is kind of a weird sort of thought. At that time, I was a power lifter. I was very, very strong for my age and size. And I thought to myself, what the heck am I doing? This guy is intimidating me? Why? This is crazy. This makes no sense. And that was it. The anxiety was gone, never to return. Yeah.
Let's go to Alexander in Miami. Alexander, you've been waiting patiently. Thank you so much watching on YouTube. Alexander, go ahead with your question for our guest, Dr. Ray Guarendi.
I would like to ask a very important question in psychology. My question is about my OCD. How would Jesus deal with someone who is suffering from intrusive thoughts about doing bad things, even though, and I agree with Dr. Ray, that people who experience these anxieties would likely get over them? So how would Jesus deal with people with intrusive thoughts about doing bad things, even though they don't do it?
Alexander, he never spoke directly about that. He never said, here's the cure for obsessive-compulsive disorder. But I'll give you a few bullet points. 1, we used to think it was psychological. Now we recognize in many cases it is an overactive neurological structure. It's almost like a subclinical epilepsy if you'd want to stretch it that far. That's 1. 2, these thoughts that intrude upon you, you do not have to think them. I know you think you do, but there's a certain component of you cooperating with them. These intrusive thoughts, whatever they might be, you could say to yourself, I am not going to think them. I'm going to redirect my attention. I don't have to think them. See, there's a component to them that you will feel anxious if you don't think them. Somehow, some way, you believe you have to think them, or they will cause you anxiety and distress, and you really, really don't. So that's the key there. I think the most important thing Jesus said is don't be anxious, all right? And I think your rumination is a form of anxiety. It really is. If we were in therapy, Alexander, we could go a lot further on this. But the exigencies of radio give us 3 minutes.
Okay, Alexander?
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, brother. God bless you. 888-318-7884 is our number. 888-318-7884. A book about the master psychologist from a pretty good psychologist. Jesus, the master psychologist, is Dr. Ray Guarendi's book. You are welcome to call with your questions for Dr. Ray. 888-318-7884. We go now to North Carolina. Laura, listening on EWTN in North Carolina. You are up next, Laura. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Ray.
Yes. So my question for Dr. Ray is, how do I respond to as a Catholic Christian, as somebody representing Jesus? How do I respond to a family member who has fallen into the lies of the LGBT affirming branch of psychology?
Laura, you don't have to respond. I think there is a mistaken notion among many of us as Christians that we have to always be speaking up. We have to always be morally pointing out what is right and what is wrong. I think judgment's involved here. If your family member would take what you would say, however gently you'd express it, and throw it back in your face, then I think you're wise not to even bring up the subject. And if they attempt to provoke you with something that they believe, and there's an attitude of, Laura, what are you going to say about that, Laura? You can say what you believe, but you don't have to entertain it and correct it because you already know it's provocation. It isn't a matter of, well, if I tell them how to think better, they will. Well, my guess would be you already know how this family member thinks, and right now they're not going to budge. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, it's a extremely close family member. Although, yeah, I do know
don't fight with them,
very
Laura.
much how this person thinks.
Yeah, you don't have to fight with them, and sometimes you can just look back at them as they give their opinion and they attempt to agitate you into getting a riposte. But in fact, you don't have to morally correct everybody at all times. I think some people are driven to do that because they think it's their Christian obligation. And I don't quite know exactly how they feel so driven. I know there's places where you have to, in Scripture, that talks about where you have to correct the man from his evil ways. I understand that. But if you went around trying to correct everybody who doesn't think like you and doesn't have any religious base, you're going to have a lot of relationships that won't exist anymore.
Well, actually, I think instead of more for myself, the response is more based, instead of trying to correct them, it's based in fear that he's hurting himself and he's going.
But you've already done that. You've already said that. How many times will you say it? That's the point.
Actually,
I'm sure
I haven't.
He knows. Oh, you haven't? Oh, okay. Well, you could bring that up.
No.
You could say, here is why I think you need to think about this, or however it comes up. And you could say that. You could say all these factors. I don't think it'll make any difference, but you can at least say it. Maybe you'll drop a few seeds here and there. But the problem is if we think we have to keep saying it.
Okay. I see. I understand.
Sure. I have a very, very, very close family member who married his boyfriend, and I said something to the effect, well, the one good thing about this is you don't have to worry about any kind of annulment or divorce because you're not married. And the family member just basically looked at me and said, you are so... Oh, he said to me, you are so completely rude. Okay.
But the point got across. You did, and that's the thing. You don't have to make that point 1,000 times. It doesn't have to be an everyday thing. There's no obligation for that.
You make it an everyday thing, you ain't going to have any relations with folks. You're only going to be around people who totally agree with you.
Well, some of us are choosing that. I think that's a very good point. Right? You're kind of making a choice to eliminate everybody who disagrees. Yeah.
What if it's your mother-in-law? What if it's your father? What if it's your brother? What if it's your adult kid? There's the problem.
Yeah, right. That's right. Well, I mean, in general, I think there is a problem of Christians isolating ourselves into comfortable little pockets, and then we're not doing the gospel any good. We're not doing what Jesus asked us to do.
In the area that I used to work, and I used to work heavily into secular psychology, secular media, all kinds of environments that were anything but Christian. For years and years and years and years,
yeah,
I was in that. And I had to figure out how to get along with those folks and have warm relationships with people who are diametrically opposed to everything I hold dear. I had to figure it out because I couldn't just alienate everybody.
Right.
I wasn't condoning the way they think, but I was, when our Lord ate with tax collectors and prostitutes, I wonder if he said, now you guys, I want to tell you, I'm not going to have dessert with you because I know how you guys act and I know how you guys think. So don't expect I'm going to eat with you again. This was the one time. Forget that after that. I don't think he did.
Nope. No.
So what was he saying? I mean, he was saying, I'm going to have a relationship with you, but I know full well how you live.
Indeed, right, that's right, and he didn't make any bones about what his belief was, but they were perfectly welcome to stay and eat with him.
Yeah, and that was fellowship too,
Right. Amen. Dr. Ray Guarendi, our guest. Jesus, the Master Psychologist is his latest book. There are more folks on the line, and I'm going to let you talk with Dr. Ray when we come back. Patrick in Sydney, Iowa, you are up next. We'll do that right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
We want to invite you to pray the Rosary with us. The Rosary is many things, but perhaps the best way to think about the Rosary is to think about it as a spiritual place, as an invisible chapel.
The Holy Rosary with Father Benedict Groeschel every night, 9:30 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. And it's true. I have fun talking with Dr. Ray, and I don't go to callers as much as I should, and I apologize for that. But I would love you to get his new book, Jesus, the Master Psychologist. Listen to him. It's available from the EWTN catalog. You can put in EWTN catalog in your Google machine, and it'll get you there. You can also go to Dr. Ray's website, which is, now it just went out of my head.
drray.com, DRRAY.com.
That is complicated.
It's an age-related thing here, Si. You know that.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
trying to deny it.
No, I know. It comes at the most embarrassing moments that everything just disappears. Who am I talking to right now? Dr. Ray Guarendi on the line. Patrick in Sydney, Iowa, the other Sydney, listening on EWTN. Thanks for waiting, Patrick. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Ray.
Yes, sir. Dr. Ray, good afternoon, I guess. First of all, I want to run this down real quick. It's my mother-in-law that I'm concerned about. I want to try and keep things in line with biblical teachings as far as honor thy mother and father. What we're experiencing, it's my wife that's actually experiencing this. Her mother's very manipulative and abusive by using that, and very controlling. If things don't go her way, it's all my wife's fault, and she should do better. She's trying to bend my wife to her will, and I'm trying to figure out how we can tackle this without stepping all over her mother in a negative way.
Well, that's the first part's easy, Patrick. You don't have to change what your wife can do, and hopefully. See, there's something stopping her from doing this, and if we were in counseling, I'd explore it. But my guess is there's something that's keeping her from not being manipulated. Let's say, for example, the mother says, I expect you here on Thanksgiving. And your wife says, well, we're going to go in the morning to Patrick's parents, and then we'll be over at 4. And then look out. Her mother's going to punish her for this one. She doesn't have to kowtow to that, and she doesn't have to correct her mother. She says, well, Mom, I'll just see you at 4. So if she goes over and Mom is cold as ice, after about an hour, she can say, well, Mom, we're going to get going because you just don't seem all that happy to be with to have us here. I mean, the bottom line is there's something that is making your wife feel like she has to either respond to her mother or try to correct her mother, when in fact that's not going to work. She's just going to have to say, I know what my mother's like. She's going to try to make me feel guilty. She's going to try to manipulate me into doing what she wants. That's not going to work. honor thy father and thy mother doesn't mean you have to do everything they say. It means you give them respect for their status as your parents. That's it. And I think what's happening, how long have you been married, Patrick?
Just a few months. And it's really hard for me. It's really hard for me, Dr. Ray. 25 years in the military, trying to step back and let my wife try and handle this. I'm telling you, it's every It's
your
every
wife,
ounce of
your wife
energy
has
I've
probably
got.
been allowing this to happen for the last how many years, right? I mean, this is long before you came on the scene, right? This is the character of her relationship with her mom, right? Mom makes her feel crappy.
Yes, sir.
Mom manipulates. Mom controls. Mom makes her comments. Mom does what she can do to get her daughter to acquiesce. I think what you can do is talk to your wife and say, what is it, honey? Why do you feel, why do you think that you have to do these things for your mom? What's driving you? I know you'll find some guilt underneath there. You'll find some I want to be a good daughter underneath there. You'll find some she's always twisted my head in every which way but loose and I can't even think straight sometime. Ask her, will you trust me to help you figure out the best way to either respond or not respond to her manipulations? If your wife would trust you to do that, and she says, yeah, Patrick, you see this a lot more clearly than I do, and that's a major step.
I appreciate that, Dr. Ray.
Yes, sir. Pepper fee.
Was that the branch, Patrick?
I took a shot at it.
He got it?
Yes.
He could recognize a Marine just by the tone of voice.
I can read minds from 3,000 miles away.
Yeah, people not in the United States are going, what is that? What does any of that mean? Yes, well, he just said the motto of the Marine Corps to Patrick and nailed it right on the head. Dr. Ray Guarendi, the amazing Dr. Ray, our guest this hour. He's got a brand new book, Jesus, the Master Psychologist. Listen to him. Maybe you've been afflicted with some of the modern ideas. Well, we all have. I don't know that any of us have not been afflicted in one way or another with the modern ideas about what makes for a successful psychology, a successful disposition, a successful strategy for navigating this life. Well, Jesus has got a better one. And you can find out all about it in Jesus, the Master Psychologist. Again, you're welcome to call and talk with Dr. Ray. We've still got a few minutes left, 888-318-7884. We'll go to Matt in Fullerton, California, watching on YouTube next. Matt, go ahead with your question for Dr. Ray.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. My question for Dr. Ray is, my wife just died on June 3rd of this year, and I know I'm going through a grieving process. And, two questions. Me talking to her throughout the day, is that crazy? And the other question is it too soon to make a commitment not to remarry again? I'm 53 years old. My wife was 54. And, I love her still so much. I'm still in love with her, and I miss her. But I don't want to remarry again. Is that being too grandiose or self-centered?
Matt, God bless you. God bless you. You've thrown out a couple of psychological terms, and be careful because those will mess you up. First of all, you said, am I crazy by talking to her? The other night I said to my wife, honey, if you pass away, I will probably talk to you for years. So one, that is not crazy. That's beautiful. That's prayer to your wife, if you would. Two, to commit not to marry again, you're doing it, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I was wrong once back in 1991, but hey, that's okay. You can correct me, my friend, if you're doing it out of a sense of obligation. Oh, for heaven's sakes, how could I even think about remarrying? Are you kidding me? What kind of love is that for my wife? She's gone for a year, and already I'm seeing somebody? No, that is not disloyal. That is nothing. The best thing to do, I believe, is to just let let time pass and see what happens. Maybe 2 years from now, you'll say, I had the most wonderful woman in the world, and I'm perfectly content to live the rest of my life and hopefully see her someday in heaven. You may say that. But you may also say 2 years from now, there's a nice lady you met, and she's a wonderful companion. It's a very warm relationship. She'll never take the place of your wife. But on the other hand, it is a beautiful relationship. So I don't think you need to make any commitment out of obligation at this point. And one final point here, Matt. Grief is the most powerful emotion that exists. It is overwhelming for people. If you haven't experienced it, it just really knocks you over. I always tell this to folks, there are no rules for at least a year. You could cry at a moment's notice. You could laugh and feel guilty because you laughed. You could not want to get out of bed one day and then the next day say, I got to get out of bed and I'm going to go work out and get my mind off of this. There are no rules. You put one foot in front of the other, and you continue to exist, and inch by inch by inch, your zest, your joy, your peace returns. And if it doesn't, almost always as a psychologist, I find it isn't just grief, but there's guilt. I didn't treat my wife, my spouse, as well as I should have. I could have done better. I regret what I did when. So that you got to watch that trickling in there too.
Okay.
All right, my friend. God bless you. God strengthen you.
God bless you too. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Sir.
Thank you so much, Matt, and God bless you. Dr. Ray Guarendi is our guest. We're talking about his book, Jesus, the Master Psychologist. Listen to him. You're welcome to call 888-318-7884. But I think we're getting pretty close here to the end, so we'll do our best if you do call. But Dr. Ray, I was mentioning that I thought that your book was a corrective. It just seems like everywhere there's messages either in a kind of almost subliminal way in the media we consume or in a very overt way in the kind of advice we get, from psychologists that we might visit or from the self-help books that we read. And a lot of it is just nonsense. We do need Jesus as a corrective for it.
The father of modern psychiatry was a man named Freud. Freud was an atheist. Freud believed that religion made you neurotic. Religion was an opiate. You had to shed it. And I think a lot of that remains. I get people coming into my office all the time, Cy, who said to me, I had a previous therapist, but he didn't respect my religion. He didn't respect my deepest held convictions. As a therapist, you have to respect how somebody is holding their morals. You just do. And I think our culture has one big message, which is God and Jesus don't know what they're talking about. And that's the cultural message. You want to distill it down. It's what it is. So if God exists, and if Jesus is God, once you become convinced of that, then there is no way to avoid that the way he says to live is the best way to live. There's no way to avoid it. You can't say, well, I think Jesus missed it. It was 2,000 years ago. I think he just didn't really quite understand modern counseling. You can't say that. It's not possible.
Well, and then the other thing you do is you back that up with all kinds of stuff that says if you do decide, you know what, I am going to listen to him. He is the master psychologist. People find out, wow, he was right. I am happy. I am full of joy and peace.
There's a boatload of psychological research that says all that. Interesting thing, self-esteem is the modern gospel. They've done studies. You chase self-esteem for its own sake, you become self-centered.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so we have a whole society that's been taught to chase self-esteem, and so we have a whole society that's self-centered. Jesus, the Master Psychologist, listen to him, available now from EWTN Press. You can get it at the EWTN Religious Catalog, at your local Catholic bookstore, or online at Dr. Ray's website, drray.com. Dr. Ray Guarendi, as always, it's a privilege to get to speak with you. Thanks for being on with us.
But don't make me write another book just to come back and
I know
visit
you're
you.
working on it right now. So get it done, then you can come back. Not until.
Okay.
You're in timeout
All right.
until another book
Okay,
comes.
Dad.
Coming up next, Paul Gondreau. We're going to talk about Jesus again, this time as the cure to toxic masculinity. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live on this Monday afternoon, at least this afternoon where we are, maybe evening where you are, maybe Tuesday morning where you are. Wherever you are, we're grateful you're with us. Thanks for being with us. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and as promised, Paul Gondreau is our guest. He's a professor of theology at Providence College. He wrote a book called The Passions of Christ's Soul in the Theology of St. Thomas Aquinas, and he wrote one of my favorite essays of all time for Inseparable, 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humanae Vitae. It's definitely the best essay I've ever read on contraception and the life issues and all that kind of stuff. So I recommend that book to you as well, Inseparable, 5 Perspectives on Sex, Life, and Love in Defense of Humanae Vitae. He's going to be one of the speakers at our conference in September 23rd through 26th out here in San Diego. And the conference is on Jesus. And so today our topic is the maleness of Jesus. Jesus as a man, and in particular, maybe Jesus' own manhood as a critique of the manhood as it is lived in the modern world. You're welcome to call and get involved in the conversation, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Dr. Paul Gondreau, thank you for being with us.
Pleasure to be with you, Cy.
So does it matter that Jesus was a man?
Does it matter that you're a man? Does it matter?
To me, it does, and to my wife. To no one else.
Yeah, no. So right, it's as obvious as the answer is to the question. You know, it unfortunately today's culture does not admit of an obvious answer. At least if we consider the larger backdrop of this culture of toxic humanity, gender confusion.
Right.
Feminists have accused focus on the maleness of Jesus as having as emptying Christ of his theological totality, and it has his maleness has no theological significance. So the short answer is yes, it matters, but unfortunately we have to argue for it and argue for it strenuously, and that's what I do.
888-318-7884 is the number if you'd like to get in on our conversation with Dr. Paul Gondreau about the maleness of Jesus. 888-318-7884. So let's start with what we teased earlier, toxic masculinity. What does the masculinity of Jesus have to do with or say about what is now called toxic masculinity?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, let's just consider as our sort of representative voice of this perspective or this culture of toxic masculinity, the American Psychological Association. Back in 2018, it issued a report, and the title, which speaks for itself, is Harmful Masculinity and Violence. And it names masculine ideals and heterosexism as inherently dangerous.
Wow.
And by masculine ideals and heterosexism, I think we can take that to mean male aggression in all forms, men as protector and providers of the family. We just, go down the line. So,
who was that? That was the American Psychological Association, or?
Yeah, the American Psychological Association,
wow.
2008. Yeah.
So yeah, there is a way in which the institutions in many cases scientific institutions, but certainly a lot of educational institutions in the humanities and sciences are captured by an ideology that is very suspicious of the male.
Yeah, and suspicious of let's now call it binary sexuality,
right.
Of male female he created them. Genesis 1:28.
Hate speech.
Yeah, hate speech, and how dare you restrict sexuality to these two categories? But the fact is that in Jesus, what the incarnation. And let me just say also that in the theological backdrop is this tendency which Christian tradition has always struggled with, and that is to affirm the full humanity of Christ. The heresy goes by the name of Docetism. It means it comes from the Greek meaning to appear. That is, Christ only appeared to be human, but wasn't really, because we can't have God, after all, entering into the stuff of this world. Well, of course, our faith affirms that indeed, as John 1:14, the Word became flesh, and flesh captures, the whole nature of the human person. But especially John, if John says flesh, it's because there was already a tendency in his day to downplay or deny the humanity of Christ. And so he uses that word flesh. Rather, he could have said man. God became man, and that would have been well and good. But there's something more abstract about the word man compared to the word flesh, sarx in Greek, karo in Latin, from which we get incarnation. And the point here is that to be truly human, then God must be one or the other sex. He must be male or female. And the historical fact of the matter is he was male. So he's fully human in the very measure that he is fully male. Just as a woman, as the Virgin Mother, as the Virgin Mary, is fully human in the very measure that she's fully female. And to back off or to downplay and to any degree Christ's maleness or the Virgin Mary's femaleness, for that matter, is to chip away at their real humanity and at Christ's real humanity in particular.
There is something about him, though, that subverts the usual way of thinking about what it is to be a man. And there is something subversive in his way of his manner of living. He's not a cartoon character. He's not even an Achilles-like hero. He doesn't. His incarnation is very specifically not meeting the Greek ideal of manhood.
Oh, it's super interesting you mentioned the Greek ideal, Cy, because let's consider just for a moment Homer's Iliad. Homer's Iliad sings about, the opening lines of the Iliad says it's going to recount a story about the rage of Achilles.
Yeah.
That is the unhinged, disintegrated Achilles and how his anger got the better of him. Well, the Gospels hold up for us, a man, it sings for us, if you will, to use the language of Homer, it sings of a man of perfect self-mastery and integrated emotion. Now, we might think that, let's just forget for the moment the Gospels, the New Testament, and let's just do a thought experiment. And let's say God has never become man. And let's imagine now God becoming concretely human. And I'd ask you, Cy, can you, describe a sort of public ministry of this man? I dare say none of us would describe, would portray a man like Jesus.
No.
Who is subject to intense emotion. And by the way, anger, do you know that in the Gospels, the emotion that is affirmed the most of Christ, it's not compassion, and what otherwise we would think it's actually anger. So that's why I love the contrast between the rage of Achilles and his unhinged anger and the Christ with his, he's a man of emotion, but it's regulated emotion, it's integrated emotion, it's mastered emotion.
Isn't that wonderful what you just said? Because that's a great thought experiment, because this gives you a sense of our failure to imagine the fullness of our humanity, because we would conceive of it as, if not Achilles, then at least Hector. Hector's a great guy, but he's no Jesus. It's a completely different ideal.
Yeah, that's really well said. I mean, compared to Achilles, Hector is a much better rounded human being, much more balanced human being. But he's no Christ. So to go back to your initial question about how we learn about our fundamental humanity in light of the incarnation. Vatican Council II and Gaudium et Spes number 22 says that Christ fully reveals man to himself. That is, we understand our humanness fully in light of Christ, in light of the incarnation. So we need to turn to him to provide the reset for being human, and because he was a male, for the reset for what it means to be male, fully male, what it means to be a man. just as the Virgin Mary provides a reset for women to understand what it means to be fully female.
Our number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. What does Christ teach us about what it is to be a man? We will continue to ask that question to our guest, Dr. Paul Gondreau, theology professor from Providence College, right after this. And your calls are welcome, 888-318-7884.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live. The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connection's set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connection's website is homeschoolconnections.com.
She is one of the most beloved saints of all time, honored as the Saint of the Little Way.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
Saint Thérèse of Lisieux entered the Carmelite convent of Lisieux in 1888 and survived only 9 more years. Still, her extraordinary holiness and prayer life prompted her superiors to have her write an autobiography, The Story of a Soul. It became a spiritual classic.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, talking about the maleness of Christ. Christ, what can he teach us about being men, about raising boys to be men? Your calls, your participation, very, very welcome. 888-318-7884. Dr. Gondreau will also be talking at our upcoming Catholic Answers Conference. You can find out about it at CatholicAnswersConference.com. And this is the quality of speaker we're having. This is why you should come, CatholicAnswersConference.com. Will your talk be on this topic, Dr. Gondreau?
It will indeed. It's on Christ's maleness. Yep.
And okay, so let's unpack a little bit more, and then we will go to calls. And there are lines open, 888-318-7884. Maybe you could give me some specifics on what Christ teaches you and me about how to be a man, teaches every mother about what kind of man she is to be raising, teaches every bride about what a man is supposed to be as a husband. What is it we're supposed to learn from Christ about manhood?
That's such a question. So, I mean, first of all, we see that Christ is not the machismo ideal,
no.
That he is subject to emotion, is not hindered in showing his emotion. Just think of the scene at Lazarus's tomb, where though he knows he's going to resurrect Lazarus, raise him from the dead, he still weeps. And weeps in the depth of his spirit. So, there's that side of it. But there's again the self-mastery side of it, the integrated side of it, that he doesn't allow these emotions if he doesn't expunge them from his humanity, nor does he allow them to dictate his actions. And this is what in our moral tradition, this is what we mean by the term virtue or moral virtue. Virtue is to live in a balanced, moderated fashion with respect to these lower animal-like drives that we have towards bodily goods. This is it's exactly what the emotions are expressive of. So there's that side of it. And then, a topic that I really like talking about a lot is how Jesus treats women. Because on the one hand, it's very countercultural to the ancient Judaism of his day, and he risks even to the scandal to treat women in a certain way that he did. On the other hand, he also, he comes down very, very strictly on sexual boundaries, on sexual morality, and the standard that he elevated. In fact, if in the ancient world the law of Moses was already, it expressed a strictness when it came to sexual morality that was unparalleled. In fact, Scripture scholars say that this is really one of the defining features of the ancient Israelites, was their strict sexual morality in particular. Jesus makes it even stricter. I mean, consider how he does away with the Mosaic permission for divorce. He names, when he condemns lust in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, chapter 5, verses 27 to 28. He calls it adultery of the heart. So this is strong language, but it shows that hardly is he backing off or taking a lax approach to sexual morality relative to what was already strict in the ancient world. He makes it even stricter. And then you balance that with this way he treated women, which was scandalous. For instance, that in the law of Moses, there were strict laws governing physical contact between men and women. It's what came to be called the laws of the Nagaya. So in short, women and men should have as little contact with each other, physically speaking, as possible, except for married couples. And because ancient Judaism tended to see, and this is in the Talmud, this is the ancient rabbinic commentary on the Old Testament, women were regarded as sexual temptresses, and so it really fell on women to stay out of public, to cover themselves, and it was their fault if they were found to be speaking to a man in public to whom they were not married. So there's that they were separated in synagogue. They had to stand behind a barrier in the temple in Jerusalem. They were not allowed to come into the inner court. They were not allowed to be disciples of rabbis. They were not considered fit to study the word of God under a rabbi. So here comes Jesus, who not accepts women as disciples, and thus sends a signal that they are there is a dignity that women possess by virtue of their humanity, which does indeed make them fit to be full disciples of the Lord. He lets them travel with him. So you got the laws of the Nagai on the one hand, and Jesus allowing, women to travel with him. Luke chapter 8, verses 1 to 3 names Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Susanna as three, and Luke says, and there were many more.
Yes.
So, it makes you wonder what's going on here with his strict sexual morality and yet his disregard, scandalous for the Jews of his day, disregard of these laws of the Nagaya. And I think the answer to that at least face value conundrum is the virtue of chastity.
Okay, so I want to get to that if I can. And I see callers coming. We're going to get to callers. 888-318-7884 is the number. I do want to ask you about this because sexual prowess is so often considered a mark of real masculinity. The perfect man lives his entire life as a virgin. What is he saying to us living a virginal life?
Yeah, so now, we know that he didn't choose virginity sort of by default, as if he had a low esteem for marriage. Jesus has the most elevated, highest esteem possible for marriage, and it comes out in his revoking the Mosaic permission for divorce. He affirms the indissoluble union between man and woman. It is a permanent bond, and in affirming, and by revoking the Mosaic permission for divorce, it was only Jewish men who had the right to divorce. So what he was doing was practically speaking, he was revoking the male right for divorce, affirming, therefore, among other things, that men and women are equal in marriage. So he's affirming that marriage is indissoluble. It's expressive of the will of God. What God has joined, let man not put asunder. It involves a partnership between equals. So his virginity, then, what it indicates is that sex is indeed given to us. It's a gift given by God for the express purpose of marriage, at least in terms of its use. And St. Thomas Aquinas, he ties in he says, look, if you consider the types of sensual pleasure we experience, pleasures associated with eating and drinking and with sex are the most intense. And he said it's not by accident. God wires us this way. He designs us this way because eating and drinking is tied to our existence as individuals. If we don't eat and drink, we won't survive as individuals. And sex is tied to the existence of the species, of the human race. Now, we know that not every human being has to procreate in order for the human race to to continue, which leaves the door open to certain individuals to embrace the virtue of virginity, which is the perpetual sacrifice of sexual pleasure for one's entire life for the sake of the kingdom of God, and thus give a powerful witness to the fact that as good and as important as human sexuality is, as marriage is, yet these are lower goods, and it's a good which is proper to this life. We as human beings are ordered to eternal life with God, and so it's extremely important that we have a witness of virginity in particular, and especially in a culture that Pope Benedict once said is characterized by this new philosophy of sexuality, whereby he meant, that nature is irrelevant, that pleasure, sexual pleasure, is an end in itself. So today especially, it's crucial that we have this witness of virginity to show that as beautiful and as wonderful as human sexuality is, it's not expressive of our deepest humanity. It's not expressive of our highest good. We are on the path to a much greater good, and that's the good that's absolute and infinite. That's the good that is God Himself.
Dr. Paul Gondreau is our guest. As we've said, he's going to be speaking at our conference September 23rd through 26th here in San Diego. Actually, I should say sunny San Diego, so that you'll be tempted to come. CatholicAnswersConference.com is where you can find out about it. Let's go to the phones, which, by the way, there are some lines open, 888-318-7884. Up next is Kirsten in Idaho Falls, Idaho, listening on EWTN Channel 130, Sirius Satellite Radio. Go ahead, Kirsten, with your question.
Hey, guys. First-time caller, long-time listeners. I'm really excited to be on.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Thank you. So one particular instance that's always infatuated me is when Jesus demonstrated His anger in the temple with the money changers, flipping tables, whipping people. It just seems so out of character, and with someone who is so calmly masculine, I guess, for a way to put it. I was just curious as to what the good doctor's response would be about how that particular instance demonstrated Jesus's masculinity and what we can take from that.
Oh, I love that. Well, Kirsten, you happen to name the very scene in the life of Christ that I chose for the cover of my book on Christ's passions. It's the fresco by Giotto on the expulsion of the money changers from the temple. I would maybe take a little issue with saying that it's out of character. I would argue it's not out of character. If it seems like it's out of character, it's because we've been presented with a false image of the Jesus of the Gospels. When you pay close attention to the textual evidence, we see a man who is very subject to emotion and to great fear, obviously, in the Garden of Gethsemane. To desire, he expresses desire to share the Last Supper with his apostles. But also, and when you just comb the Gospels, which I in fact did, to just sort of chart all his emotional reactions, the emotion he expresses the most is in fact anger. And this is somewhat of a conundrum if we consider how, at least in our fallen condition, anger is a passion that blinds reason the most. That's what St. Thomas Aquinas says. It's an emotion that can really grab hold of us. So what Jesus teaches us is that, this is part of our human structuring, if you will. So it's not bad to have to be subject to emotions, including anger. In fact, what we see in Jesus, and the moral tradition is very clear in this. Gregory the Great speaks of righteous anger, and the supreme example of righteous anger is Jesus expelling the money changers from the temple. So what we don't have in the Gospels is a pallid, emotionless, stoic Jesus, not by any stretch. Which again, if we return to that thought experiment I asked earlier, that if we had to come up with the incarnate God-man and draw a concrete picture of his life, I dare say none of us would. I think most of us would imagine a sort of stoic Jesus who rarely exhibits emotion, certainly not anger, and yet that's not the Jesus of the Gospels. So we come back to the fundamental point that we learn a lesson about what it means to be fully human, that to integrate these lower drives, not to expunge them, not to eradicate them, not to ignore them or deny them, nor to let them dictate our actions. If anger is an emotion that we struggle with, we learn from Jesus how always to keep mastered control of that emotion, even in moments of great intensity. So we must relearn that it's not out of character, it's quite in character. And so let's learn what the character is.
Kirsten, we'll leave it there because you can probably hear the music. 888-318-7884. The masculinity of Jesus is our topic this hour. Is he the antidote to toxic masculinity? Your calls welcome. 888-318-7884. Dr. Paul Gondreau, our guest. 888-318-7884.
This is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Thank you for listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Most of us Catholic parents agree our number one goal in life is to pass on the faith to our children. But here's the bad news. Today's world has a million ways to steal your kid's soul. Don't be afraid, says Father Sebastian Walsh. God loves your children even more than you do, and he desires their salvation more than anything. In his groundbreaking new book, Always a Catholic, Father Walsh shows you how to cooperate with God to bring about the fulfillment of his will for your kids. Always a Catholic reminds us that keeping our kids in the faith is about the way we live our Catholicism in our own lives and as a family from day to day. Order your copy of Always a Catholic by visiting shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
There can be a fine line between love and hate.
Plan to join us to talk about that tomorrow on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
On most of these EWTN stations.
Now here's more of Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks so much for being with us. I appreciate you taking the time. This hour, we're talking with Professor Paul Gondreau of Providence College, theology professor at Providence College. I almost moved you north to Boston College there for a second. I don't know why I had that temptation, but
Dominican school to a Jesuit school also, so that's the bigger faux
One among his works is a book called The Passions of Christ's Soul in the Theology of St. Thomas Aquinas. And Christ, the man, he teaches, I think this is a point that Pope St. John Paul II made several times throughout his long pontificate, was that Christ, the great gift that he gives us is not just that he reveals God to us, but he reveals man to us. He reveals to us what it is to be a human being.
Yeah, and John Paul II was drawing upon Gaudium et Spes, the Constitution on the Church in the Modern World from the Second Vatican Council, number 22, that Christ fully reveals man to himself. That's one of my favorite statements from the Second Vatican Council. And, just to recapitulate what we were talking about before the break, that we see Jesus expelling the money changers from the temple. This is rarely the Jesus we think of, when we consider him. He's the compassionate, the one, the one who doesn't get upset. But what we see there is we see I would call an expression of healthy male aggression. That men are structured to be aggressive. We know this in light of, in fact, neuroscience, neurobiology, that we know that the male brain and the female brain are structured differently. So when Genesis 1:28 says male and female, he created them, that just hints at the much grander reality. Our complementary sexual design reaches to the very structure of the brain, and men are wired to be aggressive in a way that women are not. In terms of sexual drive, men are structured, have an orientation to sexual desire and to pleasure in a way that women don't, which means, especially in the fallen condition, that men have a particularly difficult time with lust, at least in a way that women don't. Now, this is, of course, is not to say that women do not struggle with lust at all, but generally speaking, it's more of a male problem. So what the answer is not as our culture would have it, as the American Psychological Association, and again in its 2018 report, Harmful Masculinity, to consider all forms of male aggression to be unhealthy, to be disordered. No, what we see in Jesus is that men must properly channel their aggression. We are wired to be aggressive, but this, what we learn in light of Jesus is this: if it's complemented with a self-emptying sacrifice of self. And where I think men know that between the sexes, between men and women, we know we're the expendable sex. And by that I mean that when there's danger, men intuitively know they jump in first. If rushing into a burning building, or the ship is sinking, men know they should rush in first. And men know that they stay on, they're the last to get off the ship. This is not to say, of course, that women are not capable of the same, but that between the two, men know that they are wired to sacrifice themselves. And of course, Jesus is the highest model of that. So it's aggression at the service of others, at the service of our families, at the service of women, at the service of children, at the service of the entire human family. To provide for our families, to protect our families, to protect each other. We all learn this in light of Christ's full manhood.
888-318-7884, the number. We're talking about the manhood of Christ, masculinity in the light of Christ. 888-318-7884. There is a way to make a serious mistake, a theological mistake in the example that Kirsten gave us earlier, and that you've been pursuing of Christ throwing the money changers out of the temple, and that's one that our own. Our former chaplain and very good friend, Father Hugh Barber, points out humorously sometimes that he remembers being taught in a catechism class at a young age about, well, Jesus probably later regretted that he had let himself get carried away. And Father says, no, that is not at all the case. That this is not an incident. We should never see this as an incident of Christ. Well, he's just like all of us. He loses control sometimes. This is the hard thing for us to maybe grasp about him is he, like you said, he's a man of emotion, but he is utterly and completely not a man subject to emotion. It's entirely his choice how he expresses and follows through on his emotions, because he's entirely free. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. So I'll take as my master to follow here St. Thomas Aquinas. And when he talks about the relationship between reason and will are higher faculties in our emotions, he uses the word imperium. It means the power to command. The power to command belongs to reason and will. Now, reason and will don't exercise that power despotically. In the way that, similar to your hand, if you command your hand to pick up a pen, your hand will obey, and it will be unable not to obey. But you can't do that with your lower instinctive drives. You can tell them,
Right.
I don't want to desire, this woman, or I don't want to get angry at this, but you might, and you might struggle with it. And so when St. Thomas Aquinas talks about virtue and the way that the power to command of our higher rational faculties, how it plays out is the more virtuous we become, the more our lower animal-like instinctive drives participate in what's properly rational. It's kind of like, think of a dog that is so perfectly trained, you can take a walk with the dog without a leash, and even if another dog crosses its path, the dog still won't it'll stay by the side of its master. It's almost as if the dog is rational, but it's not. It's been trained. And for Thomas Aquinas, that analogy is especially appropriate, even more so. In fact, the analogy falls short because the dog's been trained by some external agent, by its human master. But in us, our emotions, our lower animal-like drives are mastered from within, from our own faculty. And so we're not centaurs, where you've got a rational part and then an animal rational part with a clean line of separation between the two. We're integrated, unified beings. And in the person of moral virtue, one sees what that integration looks like the most. And of course, Christ, Thomas Aquinas likes to call Christ the exemplum virtutis. What he means is the highest model of virtue, of consummate virtue. So that, that priest or the catechism, that Jesus regretted. No. I mean, not if in this sense, this would be expressive of moral regret. And if Jesus is expressing moral regret, then he's guilty of sin.
Yeah.
But
right.
and again, this is the lesson here. Who would imagine a sinless man to be so deeply, concretely human?
Yes, that's right. And it's a great kind of stamp of approval on our humanity, even though we reject our humanity. We think, well, if I was fully myself, what I would be utterly dispassionate, even disinterested somehow. And Jesus is an utter refutation of that fact. No, if you were fully yourself, you'd be alive and vibrant in ways that you're not now.
Yeah, that's right. The ancient Greek philosophical school of thought goes by the name of Stoicism, said just what you just said, that the person of supreme virtue doesn't show emotion at all. And so the supreme refutation of that is the example of Jesus Christ that we find in the gospel. You can't make this up. I mean, that in its own way bespeaks this historicity. None of us could make this up. It utterly shatters our prejudices, our misconceptions, our biases, our ignorances, and even if you got against the Stoics, you have an Aristotle, and Thomas Aquinas is drawing deeply upon Aristotle when it comes to virtue. Aristotle affirms that virtue doesn't ignore our passions, our emotions. It seeks to regulate them. Still, I don't think an Aristotle would if you presented to him the hypothetical of a God man.
This wouldn't be it.
What the New Testament provides us with.
Again, 888-3187-884, our number. So all of that having been said, we do experience in the passion of Christ at the end of his life. I mean, Isaiah says he opened not his mouth in his prophecy of the messianic suffering. And I've always thought that's the hardest thing, that he really did go to his death like a sheep to the slaughter. He did not protest. He did not, assert himself in any way. What does this communicate to us about the living as men? This seems so unmanly in a way. Like in a superhero movie, it would get just to the point where it seemed like he was going to be broken, and then he would throw off the shackles and defeat his enemies. But he does not. He goes as a lamb to the slaughter.
Yeah, well, it's a good lesson for appreciating the fact that when we're talking about moral exemplarity or modeling moral action, morality is ultimately about concrete actions, and they don't happen in the abstract. Of course, you can articulate, and we do, moral principles, but at the end of the day, moral action is about concrete action. And so the example you give is a concrete episode in the life of Jesus. It's specific to the end of his life. It's specific to the will of the Father and how he was to atone for human sin, how he was to save the human race. And remember, Jesus, way back early in his public ministry, when he's in the synagogue at Nazareth, they take him to the brow of the hill to try to throw him off.
Yeah.
He wasn't passive there. He didn't let him do it to him there because it wasn't his time yet. But when we come to the end of his life, he knew it was his hour. That's what John's gospel especially is so strong on the hour of Jesus. He knew that his hour had arrived. He knew that his hour was approaching. It was his hour. So if we can just back up for a second to what I mentioned earlier, how men are wired to use their aggression in a properly ordered way for the sake ultimately of self-sacrifice, of protection and giving for the sake of others. This means that, in a way, courage is a sort of characteristic male virtue. Certainly, women need to exhibit courage as well, but with men, and with Jesus in particular, consider just the courage, the manly courage that he exhibits at the beginning of his ministry when he goes to do battle with Satan in the desert. This is incidentally how the fathers of the church, this is how they like to speak of the temptations in the desert as Jesus going onto the battlefield with Satan. And showing that, incidentally, if the Jews were expecting a Messiah who would do battle with the Romans, and the Romans are no mean enemy, Jesus shows in the temptations in the desert that he doesn't come to do battle with the Romans. He comes to do battle with Satan. And I'm sorry, but between the two,
take the Romans.
Satan, and then at the end of throughout the whole course of his ministry, but at the end, the courage necessary to follow through with his hour, knowing full well that he was to endure unspeakably horrendous pain, exhibited in the fear that he felt, the real fear. There we see the man of manly courage who does not give in to his fear. Courage, in fact, is the virtue that regulates the passion of fear. Every virtue, every moral virtue has a specific passion that is its, if you will, subject matter. And for courage, it's fear. And no greater fear has any human being who's ever walked the face of the earth been experienced than by Jesus at the Garden of Gethsemane the night before his death. In fact, when he surrenders to the will of the Father and accepts his cup, this is really, that was the great cosmic moment. That's when the fate of humanity, our salvation, that really hung in the balance. Because after that, then it was, I don't want to, of course, I don't wish to belittle the actual passion and suffering and crucifixion, but once he accepted this and overcame his fear in such a manly, courageous way, then of course the rest followed properly. And so this is again how we gain our reset. We as men especially gain their reset, their moral reset, their human reset, their masculine reset in the manhood of Jesus Christ.
Paul Gondreau, our guest. Your call's welcome. 888-318-7884. Right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The EWTN home video highlight for July is A Church in Crisis. The church is under attack from within and from without. Through the chaos, Dr. Ralph Martin illuminates the path forward for a church in crisis. Order your DVD set at EWTNRC.com 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or call 1-800-854-6316.
Do you want to end abortion, halt the attack on traditional marriage, and ensure religious freedom for ourselves and for our grandchildren? To do this, we must convert the culture. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a grassroots initiative that recognizes this need and takes it to the streets. If you're interested in peacefully sharing the gospel in your area, visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Keller, your host. Our guest is Professor of Theology at Providence College, Dr. Paul Gondreau. He'll be speaking at our conference. I'm going to go to calls now, and we'll let the callers take it for the rest of the program. But before I do that, I got to let you know that special sale, that summer sale we're having is on right now. If you use the promo code TREAT, and I have no idea why they chose the promo code TREAT. I guess treat yourself to some Catholic Answer stuff. Everything, nothing, no except. It's not one of those everything except. No, everything at shop.catholic.com, 25% off if you use the promo code TREAT. And that includes the very fine book, A Teacher of Strange Things, Who Jesus Was, What He Taught, and Why People Still Follow Him. Just use that promo code TREAT at shop.catholic.com. We go now to Florida. Hayden in Florida, also listening to EWTN Channel 130 on Sirius XM satellite radio. You are up next, Hayden. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Paul Gondreau.
Hello. Are there any typically masculine traits that Jesus gained that can be attributed to St. Joseph?
What was the question? Were there any masculine traits that Jesus learned from St. Joseph?
Yes.
Was that,
yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. I would say, now, of course, we don't have concrete evidence of this in the Gospels, but human nature certainly would give an affirmative response. We learn what it means to be the particular sex that we have. That is, we learn what it means to be a man or a woman, most especially from our parent of that same sex. And rightfully so, because, in our Catholic tradition, our sexuality is, it's integral to us as our whole embodied nature is integral to us, and it belongs to us first and foremost because we have an embodied nature. God does not have a sex. The angels are not male and female because they don't have bodies. And right, so and the structuring of our sexuality, again, it's not, it reaches to the very design of the brain, and so men are structured to act in a male-specific way. Our brains send male-specific neurotransmitters, and so on. So the brain, for instance, the male brain is structured especially for speed and direction and motor control. The female brain for color and texture and for memory, and so on. These sort of complementary differences. So where do we learn? How does a man learn most especially how to act in a male-specific manner? Well, existentially speaking, concretely speaking, it's from our parents of that same sex. So this is, in this year of St. Joseph, there's a lot of material there to just give fruitful reflection upon, and how Joseph helped Jesus embrace his manhood, helped him to understand what it means to be male, to be a man, and to grow into that, to embrace that, to make it his own, to take ownership of it. It's not something that's alien to us, our sexuality, our sexual identity, male or female. It's not detached from us. It's not alien to us. We must own it. And certainly Jesus would have learned, to some extent at least, and I would say, at least humanly speaking, mostly from Joseph, how to do that.
Does that work for you, Hayden?
It does. Thank you very much.
All right, and I'll just recommend a book from our good friend Joe Heschmeyer, A Man Named Joseph, Guardian for Our Times, which covers a great deal of wonderful, interesting details about Joseph from the Scriptures for this year of St. Joseph. Thanks, Hayden. I hope we'll get to talk with you again. I got to go to Cincinnati now. Cincinnati, Ohio. I say it like it's a bad thing. I don't mind going to Cincinnati. I get to go to Cincinnati now. Listening on EWTN, Ken in Cincinnati, go ahead with your question for Dr. Paul Gondreau.
Hi, thanks. You got me thinking and wondering, in terms of Jesus's strong and masculine turning over the money changers' tables, and because they were accumulating wealth, I wonder if there's a kind of an official church response to the criticism of the church's accumulation of wealth and all the grandeur and all the opulence and gold and accumulation of money. That a lot of people make a parallel between the church and those
money changers,
religious leaders of Jesus's day, and the churches from strong masculine men, believers, Christians, saying that the church is doing the same thing. Is there a official church response to that criticism?
Well, I would just say we have to be careful to distinguish the wealth and how it's displayed properly and disordered displays of wealth. So, the specific scene of the expulsion of the money changers from the temple, Jesus does not notice. He fully accepts the beauty of the temple itself. It was one of the wonders of the ancient world. And talk about a structure that was grandiose and was built at tremendous cost, but to give glory to God, to raise our spirits to God. What he went after with the money changers is how they were turning that structure that was built to glorify God and to raise our awareness of God. They turned it into an economic exchange place. You've turned my house of prayer into a den of thieves, as he said. So it's not so much the wealth per se. It's how, it's where's the wealth, where is it being channeled, how's it being used, what's the purpose of the wealth, and is it appropriate that, then there's nothing wrong with economic exchange in itself, but it is if you're turning a house of worship into a place of economic exchange. So I think it's important that we make those sorts of distinctions, and the church always does when addressing these sorts of issues.
Ken, thank you very much. Of course, everybody's called at the end of the hour, so I got to keep moving to try to get everybody on. Eldon in Silver Spring, Maryland, listening on EWTN. You're up next, Eldon. Go ahead with your question for our guest, Dr. Paul Gondreau.
Doctor, thank you. Just curious as to...
Eldon, right into the phone, okay, so we can hear you?
Sorry, is that better?
Yes.
Who died on the cross? God, Jesus, or both the divinity and the human?
All right, Eldon, thank you.
All right, well, that's you need a full course in Christology to give an adequate answer to that question. In fact, the church took 5 full centuries to give an intellectually coherent answer to that question. But it's you asked really 2 questions: who died, and what died. Sai, if I ask you who are you, you would answer Sai. But if I ask you what are you, you would give me a different answer, because we all know that there's a difference between what we are and who we are. Who names you as the individual person that you are? What is what you share in common? And so with Jesus, who he is, unlike you or me, he's a divine person. He's the person of the Son. But what is he, unlike you and me? He's 2. He's human and divine. So he has 2 natures united in the one divine person of the Son. So it was a human being who was born of the Virgin Mary, and who died on the cross. But because that human being was a divine person, we can say, as our tradition always has said, that God was born of the Virgin Mary, and thus the Virgin Mary is the mother of God. That God died on the cross.
Boy, Eldon, that's tough. You know what you can also do is go over to Catholic.com and type in that question, because we've dealt with it in many different ways. But as Dr. Gondreau said, Oh my, we're talking about one of the great mysteries and one in which we have to be very, very careful in our use of language and the distinctions we make. Dr. Paul Gondreau, thank you for all the fine distinctions you made for us and reminding us of the real vibrant and energetic masculinity of Jesus.
Pleasure to be with you. Great to share it.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the conference.
I look forward to it very much.
We told you we're going to have good speakers at the Catholic Answers Conference. Dr. Paul Gondreau will be among them. And he'll be talking about just this subject. If you want to join us, just go to CatholicAnswersConference.com. We'd love to see you there, CatholicAnswersConference.com. Join us tomorrow. We'll talk about that new motu proprio from Pope Francis, first hour.